Welcome back to another special episode of the Ed Morrissey Show podcast version. I'm talking today with Terry Jeffrey of CNS News, cnsnews.com. Terry, unlike some in the media, has been covering the developments in the Benghazi Benghazi scandal, very closely for some time for CNS News. They've been doing some great work over there, work that we're not seeing in the mainstream media over the last few months. It was a big story for a while, Terry, but then dropped off the radar screen before the election, and the media until now hasn't paid much attention to this case.
Now, there's been remarkably inadequate interest in this, and I think there's no doubt. We know that the administration was covering up with the story that they told about Benghazi. What we don't know is why. And when you have a Secretary of State and President of the United States actively covering up for the murder of the U.S. ambassador, it's a huge story. It's hard to imagine a much bigger story.
You know, there's an old saying in the news industry that if it bleeds, it leads, but we're not seeing that in this case. And I think that people seem to forget that 4 Americans died in this, and yet you still have people in the media like Jonathan Alter who said last night, well, there's nothing to cover up, so there's no cover-up.
Well, you know, the truth is the information that has come out, there is a fair amount of information that has come out, has only raised more questions. It hasn't settled questions. And most of the people who are involved in this, who are on the ground in Libya, either in Tripoli or Benghazi at the time of the attack, they haven't been heard from. Today we're going to hear from one, Greg Hicks, who is the Deputy Chief of Mission in Tripoli, basically the number 2 guy to Ambassador Stevens. We're going to hear from him. But we still haven't heard from the diplomatic security agents who were on the ground in Benghazi. There were 5 of them. They survived. 3 of them had been stationed there. They were only there on temporary duty, meaning they were only there for a month. Their identities, in fact, to this moment, have been kept anonymous by the State Department. So we're not going to know the truth about what even happened on the ground until we hear from those folks.
Well, let's talk about the people we're going to hear from today. 3 different witnesses, 2 of whom have not testified before Congress before, one of whom I believe did. And we're going to get a little bit more of the story. First off is Gregory Hicks, like you said, Deputy Chief of Mission in Libya, Stevens's right-hand man in this particular case, who apparently told congressional investigators in an earlier interview that this was an attack from the get-go and that his jaw dropped when he heard the administration blaming this on a YouTube video. What else are we going to hear from Gregory Hicks today?
Well, I think this is a person who can give us an eyewitness TikTok account of what was going, at least from the perspective in Tripoli. When the initial eyewitness of this attack was the regional security officer, State Department diplomatic security guy who was on temporary duty in Benghazi. He basically was in charge of the security in the State Department compound there. He was watching the surveillance system in what they call their tactical operations center there, when dozens of armed men swarmed literally through the front gate of the compound there. He instantly contacted the embassy in Tripoli, talked to Hicks, and he also contacted the CIA annex down the road. And over the course of the hours that this attack went on, he and other people on the ground in Benghazi were in contact with those folks back in Tripoli. So Hicks will be completely on top of that, plus will be on top of the communications that went back and forth between Libya and the people here in Washington, D.C., particularly the State Department people.
I think Hicks is also going to talk a little bit about the talking points that came up during Susan Rice's Sunday appearances, the Sunday after the attack, and the conflict that it created with the president of Libya, the elected president of Libya, who was, at the same time that Rice was saying this is all about a demonstration that got out of hand, the president of Libya was also appearing on American television saying this was a terrorist attack and we actually know who it was that did it.
Right, and she directly contradicted the president of Libya. You know, one thing we know that Hillary Clinton claims she actually did on the night of September 11, 2012, was she claimed she talked to McGareth, the president of Libya. So she would have been communicating with him directly. We also know at that night that in the 10 p.m. hour, she put out a written statement. Anybody can go to the State Department website now and look at it, called a Statement on the Attack in Benghazi, in which she became the first senior U.S. official to bring up the idea that somehow there's a connection between the terrorist attack there and what she called inflammatory material posted on the internet, an allusion presumably to the YouTube video. This week I went over to the State Department briefing and asked the spokesman there, Patrick Ventrell, who told Hillary Clinton on the night of September 11th, 2012, when this battle was still going on in Benghazi, before Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods were killed there, who told her that this was being justified as a response to quote-unquote inflammatory material on the Internet? The State Department will not answer that question. But therein lies the genesis of this cover-up. For some reason, Hillary said that night, and a week later, or almost a week later, Susan Rice was on national TV telling that story, even though they knew it was false. So what was the genesis of that? I think one of the things the congressional investigation has to get to is that question. Who started this? And then they can get to that person and ask why. Which means, by the way, they have to bring Hillary Clinton back in and get sworn testimony from her, one more time at least.
Now, the other person that we're going to hear from that should be pretty interesting on this question as well is Mark Thompson, who is still at the State Department, still working in the counterterrorism area, and who he claims, his claim is that Hillary Clinton and her right-hand person in the State Department cut the counterterrorism group out of the response to the Benghazi attack. Tell us a little bit about that. I know that we only have a couple more minutes left.
Yeah, we don't know. I don't know the details of that. Presumably, we're going to hear them from Mr. Thompson today in his testimony coming up shortly before the committee. But it's a key thing. Why did they want this guy? Why did they want the people who had the most expertise out of the way? And I tell you, it reflects something that was going on the ground in Benghazi. In Benghazi, in that compound, Ed, there was only 3 temporary duty diplomatic security officers stationed there. According to the Accountability Review Board report, these were people who had no prior overseas experience. They're young, inexperienced guys. They're putting them down in this 8-acre compound in the middle of one of the most lawless cities of the world. They're rotating them through on a monthly basis, so there's no hope they'd ever really get to know the environment and the people there. They're putting through State Department diplomats on a 13-day rotation. So the one diplomat that would be in that place was a guy who oftentimes came from out of country, didn't go through Tripoli, was sitting there for 13 days. I mean, the State Department presence in Tripoli, quite frankly, was a joke. The CIA presence down the road was not a joke. And I think that's another question that has to be examined is why exactly were they putting those particular people there in that particular way? And I think the fact they don't want those questions answered is one of the reasons that we haven't seen those State Department people brought forward and allowed to tell their stories.
Well, Terry, I know that the hearing is going to open up, the doors to the hearing are going to open up pretty quickly here, and we've got to let you go so you can get your seat in there so you can report for cnsnews.com about what happens in today's hearing, and we will be watching cnsnews.com for your updates. And do you have a Twitter handle, by the way, that we can also keep an eye on?
You know what, I do, but I regret to say I hardly ever use it. So I won't be tweeting today, but I will be writing it.
We'll be writing at cnsnews.com. Terry Jeffrey, thanks so much for your time, and good luck in today's hearing.
Thank you very much, Ed.